Hi everyone, I'm back with another video from the Season 9 PTR and I want to talk about the Pulverize Druid. This is one of the builds that got a new unique, the Rotting Lightbringer two-handed mace, and a lot of people were excited for Pulverize, including myself. I think this is a super fun build. I remember fond memories from back in the day when I first played Druid. Pulverize and the Shockwave was one of my favorites out there, and it's supposedly upgraded now. But I have to say that the odds are kind of stacked against the Druid. Druid is overall the weakest class, it looks like, and Pulverize is already one of the weakest builds on that class, and the new unique weapon is not really much of an upgrade, if even. So I want to talk a little bit about that and also give my suggestions to the devs that I've actually already posted to them as well, because I think this could become extremely strong and fun with some tweaks to this new unique item. So you see this in action right now. This is these poison puddles that spawn from the two-handed mace. And there is an interesting mechanic behind those poison pools, which is that they snapshot the overpower that was part of the original skill cast. So Pulverize has a guaranteed overpower every 10 seconds, and then you also have, for example, the Provocation passive and Obsidian Slam. So there's various sources of guaranteed overpowers for Pulverize, and this is generally like a really heavy overpower synergistic build. And well, you spawn the puddle, and the puddle actually can overpower when you slam it as well. So you can see this in action. I don't have the numbers on, but basically these are all orange numbers because I have 100% crit. And then I slam the pool and the pool pulses, and that pulse will be an overpower. And every single attack will be an overpower coming from that, which is kind of cool. So the general problem with overpower is that overpower builds are usually very inconsistent. So this is like something I actually made a video about, a few weeks back, and we got some overpower nerfs as a result, and overall we're kind of going in the right direction. But in the case of, for example, Pulverize, you still have the problem that your overpowers are like 20 times stronger than your non-overpowers. There's such a large gap despite that overpower nerfs. And you can't kill even like a small skeleton when you don't overpower. But when you do, you one-shot the entire pack and the elites as well. So this is how big that gap is. But with the pool, you actually make it somewhat consistent. And that actually felt really good, I have to say. Now the problem is, this poison pool has a 10 seconds cooldown, and also it sometimes desyncs with your overpower synergies. So for example, Pulv itself has a 10-second timer for an overpower. You can see this right now. So the green number, this green icon here, this is the new unique. This has a 10-second timer. When it goes to 10, you do a Pulverize, that will spawn the pool. And here's the 9, this Pulverize icon. This is the 10 seconds overpower timer. But sometimes they desync and the pool is actually not snapshotting the overpower, and then it just does nothing. So that is like one problem, I think. And it's kind of like consistent until it's not, basically. And well, the other thing is that it also just has this long cooldown, so you can't actually really rely on it when you walk into a next pack. Sometimes you just have to wait like 5 seconds to spawn another pool. Or, here, like when you have a boss fight, like we spawn the pool, it lasts for 6 seconds and then it despawns, and you just have like a random 4-second gap. It's like the same problem that, for example, side rogues have. And it just doesn't feel great. On a boss fight, I guess it's kind of alright, because it's just kind of, matters like what is the average DPS. But when it comes to like farming a run and like trying to go from pack to pack, it is pretty bad. And another thing that you might have noticed by now that I really dislike about this whole playstyle is that there is no shockwave aspect. So it turns out the shockwave aspect, which is like the identity of Pulverize, basically doesn't work with this. So you have to play without the shockwave aspect, and in general it's kind of hard to fit all of the necessary requirements because you have very few aspect slots. Your two-handed weapon is gone for the unique, and then you have like the user and horror aspect, for example. So you need to like convert your Pulverize into an earth skill so they can get all the synergies online. And it just doesn't really feel all that great overall. On top of the damage just being like pretty subpar. So, this is supposed to be like, a kind of like new hype thing. And I don't think anyone is really gonna hype for this, because what is happening with this new unique is it's inconsistent. It is a damage upgrade, I believe. So I have not really found a way to deal more damage than this when I don't use the two-handed unique. So there is a damage upgrade there, but it's like very minor and effectively only for very slow content, like for pushing and for like maybe T4 bosses and stuff. Yeah, the puddles are kind of okay. But when it comes to like farming, like T4 dungeons or something, you really don't want to rely on this 10-second cooldown. It's just kind of awful. And then also comes the fact that it's like a very, you know, kind of like boring playstyle if you look at this here right now. So when you do an actual push run with this weapon, well, you just try to stack the poison pool and try to pull everything into that poison pool, and you just like slam, 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 and you don't really do anything else. So I literally have one other skill on my bar right now because it's a Grizzly Rage setup. You can also play this with Petrify and Bulwark, but you know, basically the same story. So overall, it's not very engaging, and it's only for like niche content that most people would not really do on, especially a very weak build like Pulverize, like when it comes to like bossing and you know, pit pushing or something. So you know, it doesn't really fit like a real role right now. I can also link you the planner of what I made here so that you can go check this out for yourself. I did do some tweaks when I actually played this because, for example, Rabid Bear right now is bugged. And as I mentioned, I also tried some other stuff with Petrify. So I did do some tweaks on the planner, which are not currently included here. But when the actual patch notes come out and we'll see what they will do, I guess Pulverize might get quite an upgrade because this is kind of like a priority, I think, for the devs to try to fix. And Pulverize is just like one of the most fun, kind of just like a blaster build for druids. And at least personally, I would really love to play a druid with Pulverize, but not currently. So the question is, what can actually be done with this weapon to make this better and more fun? And I do have some ideas. So first of all, let's look at the weapon here. It has this 10-second timer. I think that needs to come down in some way, pretty significantly, in fact. Actually, what I would do here is I would give this a guaranteed spawn every time you attack, but with the caveat that pools cannot overlap. So the idea here would be to kind of like break up this, you know, stand still and kind of just slam in the same spot playstyle that we have right now, which is just pretty boring, and give it extra like farming potential, farming consistency, where you can go from pack to pack, you always have your pools, you splash into them, and you get those extreme damage pulses, which just kind of feels good. If you make it so that the pools can't overlap, well, then you have a little bit of like a, you know, gameplay variance, a bit of a mini game where you try to go around, you know, the boss, maybe like stutter step around the boss and try to spawn like 2-3 pools and then kind of like slam into all of them and then they all start pulsing. I think something like that could make this feel much better, both in terms of like, you know, speed content and also in like, you know, bossing scenarios. And not only that, Pulverize is notoriously terrible at killing bosses compared to its AoE damage. So it has like a really large gap here with like, you know, good AoE damage comparably and then terrible boss skills. So if you could like get multiple pools by, you know, playing around this a little bit, then you could actually increase your boss DPS with the right gameplay and a bit of like, you know, the good gameplay basically. And I think that would feel very fun. Then we also have these little like splashes that come out as like the second part of this unique effect, where you get like these 40% of the total damage around it. I felt like this was doing literally nothing. I think this could be straight up deleted. So it's just like sometimes there's like these little blobs that pop out and maybe hit something. I think that part should just not exist. This is kind of whatever. And instead, I would replace this with some effect that gives the pool a guaranteed overpower no matter what. So it shouldn't rely on like this 10-second timer that you have for the Pulverize, where you know, again, you get like this 10-second overpower here every time, because sometimes it just doesn't happen. So it just feels really bad, and most of the time you can't really know when it doesn't happen because it can desync since you have multiple sources of overpowers. You have overpowers here, and you have overpowers on the provocation, and this just leads to the fact that sometimes this 10-second timer is not consumed with the pool, but one of the other overpowers is consumed with the pool, and then the desync. So that kind of feels terrible, and I think they should always overpower. And not only that, I would really like to go another step further and make every shockwave and every Pulverize that hits one of the puddles also guaranteed overpowers. I just want to build where, you know, I walk in, I have consistent damage, it feels good, and I don't have this weird difference between overpower and not overpower. Pulverize is so heavily built into overpower synergies, I think it should just get the overpowers for free from this weapon. And I think that would make it really fun and also much more powerful than it is right now. And of course, the last part is we definitely need to include the Shockwave. Shockwave is so important for Pulverize as like the identity of the build, I think. So that should also be included. Like this puddle should work with the Pulverize Shockwave from the aspect, which, well, right now I have here in a planner, but in fact I did remove that when I played it. So it just didn't work and you don't get the extra pulses and stuff. So that also needs to be included in the mix. And then we have a real cool build, I think. Obviously, I'm suggesting a pretty hefty buff to Pulverize, but on the other hand, I gotta say the build really needs it, and Druid overall really needs it. Druids are not really looking spicy in Season 9, I gotta say. And Pulverize being, you know, maybe not like a top of the meta, but, you know, somewhere in like A tier, feeling good and blasting through Torment 4 and, you know, maybe farming, you know, pit 75s or 80s or so in like 2-3 minutes. Like something like that would not really break anything. And we definitely have way stronger builds out there than that. So with those suggestions, maybe the numbers could be a little bit tweaked on the pulses or something like that. I think the build would feel a lot better to play. And obviously it would get a much needed upgrade, because right now this unique is just kind of dead on arrival, I gotta say. But yeah, this is what I got here for now for the Pulverize Druid. It's playable, you know, you can do Torment 4 with this right now. You can even farm T4 Belial, kind of. It's just like Grizzly Rage is really bad for bossing, for example, because I tried this actually, and my Grizzly Rage exactly falls off in the time that it takes to open a chest and spawn a new Belial. So that is kind of awful, so we have to do something else there, like Petrify, for example. But even then, it's like a kind of slow boss kill. It doesn't feel great. You see here, this is like a T80, and I'm basically pushing 80. So maybe this will go to like 85 or something like that with some more optimized gear and some fishing. But this is about it. So there's definitely a lot of room for improvement here, and I really hope that the devs will do something. These are just my suggestions. So yeah, Pulverize, I was hyped for it. Right now, I'm not anymore, but hopefully devs will do something about it. So let me know what you think about my suggestions, or maybe you have some other ideas of your own that would make this like a bit, you know, more interesting and stronger than it is right now. But I think what I suggested would be pretty fun, actually. So this is just what I have to contribute for the Pulverize Druid for now. Hope you enjoyed my video here. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you guys next time.